Welcome back. Finally, back at it on Caps Hockey Review, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Well, lots happened since I've been with you last, so we'll break down kind of the week that was since I've been with you last, and we'll look at the Caps victory over the Islanders on Tuesday night. Caps Hockey Review, let's do it.
Red Lights, Stanley Cup champions.
And off we go. Caps Hockey Review underway once again. Back with you. I appreciate you joining me, ladies and gentlemen. The playoff push is on. After this evening's game, the Caps are sitting at 7 regular season games to go before the playoffs. Still some big matchups in there. We've got Pittsburgh 2 games in a row coming up, Rangers 2 games in a row, Boston again. Still some big games in there. So staying sharp is going to be key. But what I really want to touch on here before I jump into Tuesday's game is really kind of the role the Caps got on the last 2 games against the Islanders. The Islanders have struggled a bit since the trade deadline, but still a very formidable opponent. So for the Caps, Ilya Samsonov got the shutout in Thursday's game, that first game of this little mini series against the Islanders. Technically, both goalies got a shutout because nobody scored until the shootout. But a really good showing from Samsonov there, got rewarded with a second consecutive start, which we haven't seen much of this second half of the year. Not as good in that one for Samsonov, but you can't really pin. The Islanders scored 3. I would say maybe one of them you could say, oh, need a save there, but the other 2 were just kind of wild bounces, unlucky in front of the net. So 2 pretty strong performances from Samsonov. Now it becomes, okay, Vanacek gets the net on Tuesday night. How is he going to respond? Well, he responded really, really great. He went out and got his own shutout. 19 saves. The goalie controversy is going to continue, it looks like, which might be a good thing. These 2 look a lot better when they're pushing each other and there's that competition in the air. Now, we hopefully, and I would imagine it is, real good healthy competition. Both guys, they're supportive of each other, but still both guys want to play, and as they should. So both guys doing their best to stay sharp, and they're looking really good right now. Now, as far as the rest of the team goes, still some important pieces out, obviously. Alex Ovechkin missed his second consecutive game on Tuesday. That lower body injury still seems to be nagging. Justin Schultz also missed Tuesday's game, actually practiced in a non-contact jersey on Monday. So hopefully he's getting a little bit closer. But Alex Ovechkin still has not skated since sustaining that injury. So moving along here, Peter Laviolette has already said we're not going to rush him back, and as they should not at all. They're going to make the playoffs. The Rangers are not technically mathematically eliminated just yet. I believe about a loss or 2 for them and a win or 2 for the Bruins, and that'll pretty much end any threat of a playoff spot getting swiped from the current top 4 in the East. But for the Caps, you don't want to rush this guy back just yet. If he's good to go before the playoffs, fine, great, get him in. But if he's not, there is no reason to rush him back in. You'll need him in the playoffs. You don't want to re-aggravate anything that's going on. If I had to guess, just kind of watching that play, it looks like he just took a weird stride coming through the neutral zone. I guess it's maybe a little bit of a pull, maybe a hamstring or a quad or something like that. These muscle type injuries, the best thing to do is just for him to stay off of it as best he can and just let it heal. To rush him back now without, and really, I'm not going to say they don't need him because they do. He's the best goal scorer in the world. But they've played really well without him. So this isn't a situation like if they had come out in these last 2 games and just gotten canned by the Islanders, I'd say, okay, need to get him back sooner than later. But right now, no rush. Just play on the side of caution. You'll need him come playoff time. He's got plenty of time, a couple weeks here at least, to get back in game shape and back ready to play. Now, Justin Schultz looks to be a bit closer. Like I said, he's skated, he's shed that non contact jersey in practice, so probably imminent on the return for Schultz, I would say. Now, that's not to say that again, I mean they've played well without Justin Schultz. Trevor Van Riemsdyk has really stepped up in Schultz's absence. Now, when it comes down to it, Justin Schultz will get the nod. Of course he will. He's kind of become that yin to Carlson's yang. Both guys kind of with their offensive defense or defensive offense, however you want to word that. Either way, they supply offense from the back end. You get my point. Now, as we look toward this coming schedule, and I'll circle back to Tuesday's game here in a moment. Like I said, there's some big games here. These 2 games against the Penguins are going to be huge. And the reason why is because Pittsburgh has been on a tear the last 6-8 weeks. They fired their GM. It's been well documented. I guess technically he didn't get fired. He stepped aside. They parted ways mutually, however you want to say it. The writing was on the wall. Things were not going well in Pittsburgh, and he was probably looking at being dismissed after the season if he had stuck around. But they bring in Ron Hextall at the GM position. They bring in Brian Burke as Senior Vice President of Hockey Operations. These 2 guys know about winning Stanley Cups. I've talked about it on here before. Ron Hextall was assistant GM with the Kings when they went on that run in the early 2010s, winning those 2 cups in 12 and 14. Brian Burke built the Anaheim Ducks. He built the Vancouver Canucks. He was the one responsible that drafted the Sedin twins and pulled that deal off to draft them back to back. These guys know about what it takes to be successful at the NHL level. And this Penguins team is not to be taken lightly. That top line for the Penguins, Crosby, Gensel, Rust, have been really, really good. And it's worth noting, Evgeny Malkin hasn't even been in the lineup. If adding Malkin back into this picture, this is a good team. And this is still a really good test for the Caps. This is a very, very possible playoff matchup. If the Caps make it out of the first round, I would just about bet the Penguins will be waiting for them in the second round. And we're going to see both these teams, every time they win the cup, one goes through the other. So that should be very interesting to see how that all shakes out. But focusing on today, Tuesday, the New York Islanders have hit the skids a little bit since the trade deadline. Now, we've kind of seen this in the past. The Caps have made, moves like this in the past. In this case, for the Islanders, you bring in Kyle Palmieri, Travis Zajac, but no real players that are currently in the lineup moving out. So what it means is, let's say Palmieri slots in second line. Okay, somebody on the second line has to move down to third. Someone on the third has to move down to fourth, and somebody comes out. You change the dynamic of multiple lines when you make trades that bring in a player who's ready to play now without a ready to play now player in exchange. Why is this different than the Capitals' acquisition of Anthony Mantha? Well, you trade Jacob Vrana. So Mantha's just going to slot right in on that Vrana spot. And we've seen Anthony Mantha adapt really well. But we've talked about that already. I'm not going to get too sidetracked on that. The big point here is that the Islanders have struggled since the trade deadline, and I would guess it's kind of a team chemistry thing. Maybe, they needed scoring punch, and Kyle Palmieri really does bring that. But we've seen trade deadline acquisitions, these big splash moves rarely work out for the better for these teams. So the Caps really, really good against the Islanders. I'm not going to take away from what the Caps have done today or the previous two games just based on the Islanders' struggles because they're still a very good team, a very formidable opponent, and we should be very excited that the Caps have done so well against them these last three games. There's a lot to like here. Defensively, the Caps have that's kind of been the knock on them these last couple of years is that they're soft defensively. They're soft in their own end. They played so well in their D zone, especially on Tuesday. Yes, Vitek Vanacek made some big saves, and he deserved every bit of that shutout because he was razor sharp. But the defense did a really, really good job of minimizing those Islanders' chances. I think the real only grade A looks the Islanders had were on the power play. So defensively and at 5-on-5, the Caps lead the league in goals scored at 5-on-5. That's huge because most teams that make the playoffs can do their damage on special teams on the power play. But teams who can consistently create offense and be effective at 5-on-5, that is a hugely important stat to be that good at 5-on-5 this year when last year they certainly weren't. They did a lot of damage on the power play, especially that second half of the year. To see this team now be this good at 5-on-5 and generating opportunities, that's a real encouraging sign moving forward. Now, this Islanders team, like I said, kind of in this weird state of flux, but still, really good opponent. I really like the Caps showing on Tuesday. They kind of battled through some iffy calls there for them. Wilson had one that was kind of iffy. Mantha had one that was iffy. Sprong really had one that was iffy. The Caps definitely could have gotten some trouble there, but the PK looked really good. Carl Hagelin, the guy I want for this guy so much to score every night because he works so hard. He does all those like unglamorous things that don't show up on the stat sheet usually or don't show up on the score sheet, but probably the most solid player game in, game out. Defensively, doing his thing, creating pressure in the O zone, forechecking, all that good kind of thing. So I'm very excited for this team. Do I have any concerns at the moment? Should we as Caps fans have concerns? Of course we should. And that's I'll put it this way. I will feel a lot better about this team if they have good showings against the Penguins. This Penguins team is very dangerous, as I've touched on. So for the Caps now, okay, you've done your damage against the Islanders. They've done really good. 2 shutouts in 3 games, only allowing 3 goals total. Really good. If they can go out and do something similar against the Penguins, that is going to be a very encouraging sign. This team needs to hit their stride going into the playoffs, and they're doing it. It looks like they're doing it right now. And if they can keep that going, if they can just build this wave of momentum to ride through the playoffs, that's what is going to get them back to the Cup final. This team right now does not need to look toward the playoffs yet. They need to just take this one game at a time. At this point in the season, every game is the biggest game of the season. They don't need to worry about what happened last night. They don't need to worry about what will happen tomorrow night. They need to worry about this game on their schedule. The game they need to be worried about right now is Thursday night against the Penguins. Nothing after that. Just treat every game right now as if it's the biggest game of the year because in truth it is. You're battling for your playoff position. Now, does playoff position really matter in this division? Like really no matchups are really favorable over another for the Caps, I would say. They've had their struggles and successes against all 3 potential opponents. I mean, Penguins, Islanders, Bruins. We've seen them play good games against each opponent, and we've seen them play bad games against each opponent. And I mean, if I had to pick one right now, I'd say the Islanders would probably be a favorable match, but that they may play really well against Pittsburgh, and I'll think Pittsburgh's a really good opponent. But moving past that because we don't really need to worry about that yet because that playoff seeding picture is still really, really unclear. And we're probably not going to see it clearly until possibly the last day of the season. I mean, it's such a tight race in the top three spots, and the Bruins aren't far behind in that four spot. If the Islanders kind of continue on this skid, the Bruins could easily jump up into that fourth spot. The Rangers still are not mathematically eliminated. I mean, they could absolutely jump up and swipe a spot. Now they need some help. I mean, they need the Bruins or the Islanders to continue losing. I would say more than likely they need the Bruins. The Bruins have played a few more games than everybody else in that top three, and they're still, I believe, 4 points behind the Islanders. Now, am I saying the Rangers are going to jump up and swipe a playoff spot from the Bruins? Probably not. I mean, they need quite a bit of help, but this is this is going to be an interesting race. It's really going to be a photo finish. The Caps have a couple games against the Rangers coming up next week. So, I mean, that might be their ticket to clinch for sure. If they can knock off the Rangers 2 games in a row, that should just about solidify them. If they could beat the Penguins 2 games in a row, that should solidify playoff position for them. So, every game of the year, every game from here on out is going to be the biggest game of the year. And same thing in the playoffs. You got to treat it the same way. So, we've seen really, really good things these last 3 games. The goalies look really good. The team stepped up without Ovi and Schultz in the lineup. In fact, the Capitals are 11-0-1 without either Alex Ovechkin or Tom Wilson in the lineup this year. And really, the reason for that, I would say, is missing top six forwards like that. It forces the rest of the team to work that much harder. And that's what I think we're seeing come through right now is just this team realizing they're down a man, but it's next guy up, and we gotta pick up the slack, and that's what they're doing. So I really like what I'm seeing these last 3 games. We'll see how Thursday night goes, and we'll see how Saturday goes. But really encouraging signs this week since I've been with you last. Of course, that Sabres game was not ideal, but 3 games since have been very good, and hopefully it continues. This team, I really try not to get too excited about this team. I will tell you, I am much more excited for this team this year than I was going to the playoffs last year. They look like a team that's hungry to win. They've injected, some new blood, some youth into that lineup. Anthony Mantha looks good. Sprong looks good. Sherry looks good. All these new guys are really kind of mixing in well on the back end. Justin Schultz looks good. Zdeno Chara looks good. Really, goaltending, I think, is going to be the dark horse issue here. And that's going to be a really interesting thing that kind of is going to play itself out as well. If I had to guess, I mean, unless Vitek Vanacek really, really just goes lights out and Samsonov hits a cold streak here, I would guess we're going to see Ilya Samsonov get the first start of the playoffs, but not too sure yet. That again, I think like this whole playoff seed picture is going to not become clear until probably the end of the season or the last day of the season. So the Caps really on a good track here. Hopefully they keep her going. We'll find out Thursday night against the Penguins. We'll talk to you then.